Welcome to Surviving the Side Hustle, the podcast for high performers who've gone all in, but still feeling a little stuck. I'm your host, Rob Tracy, coach, speaker, and creator of the Prime Performance Process. If you're a solopreneur, small business owner, or just launched your side hustle and you're tired of grinding with no momentum, this is for you. Every week, we bring you guests that have broke the code, generated momentum, and finally got unstuck. And we're diving into their stories, their struggles, and their secrets to generating massive momentum in both their personal and professional lives. We don't do fluff here. We do frameworks, real talk, and share the kind of insights that get you unstuck for good. Welcome, and let's get rolling. But before we dive in, I got to remind you, if you're overwhelmed, spinning your wheels, or just tired of hustling without the results, it's time for a Prime Performance Strategy session. In this free call, we'll zoom out on your life and business, identify the real reason you're feeling stuck, and build a game plan to help you reclaim your confidence, energy, and gain some clarity so you can get back to doing what you set out to do. Lead, grow, and thrive. This isn't surface level coaching. It's a system built on resilience, intentionality, clarity, and alignment. So head over to survivingthesidehustle.com/free call to grab your spot today. Again, that's survivingthesidehustle.com/free call. Let's get going and help you look good, feel good, and do great things. What's going on, and welcome back to another episode of Surviving the Side Hustle. Today, I've got my buddy Walter on, and he's an interesting dude, and I'm excited to kind of dive into the conversation with him because he's a passionate advocate for personal development like myself, and more so mentorship. He's dedicated to empowering individuals to really unlock their full potential. He's got a rich background in coaching and leadership, and he loves to cultivate a wealth of knowledge and his experience, and uses that to inspire others to pursue their goals with confidence as well. He's a dynamic speaker and engaging storyteller, so I'm excited to dive in and hear some of these things. And a fun fact, when he's not speaking or coaching, he's actually out and about flying his helicopter. So I'm excited to kind of dive in and hear a little bit more about what you've got going on. So welcome to the show, Walter. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for the invitation. I look forward to a great conversation today and see if we can add some value to people.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to kind of dive right in. You're the Dutch mentor himself. Where did that come from? How did you get started with that? Where'd your leadership and mentorship kind of journey kick off at?
Well, interesting enough, right, is as an entrepreneur, somebody who has a business, you always have to come with a personal brand. I was born and raised in Holland, so the Dutch connection made a whole lot of sense. I really wanted to have the Flying Dutchman, but of course that was already taken by somebody else. So the Dutch mentor made sense to me, and that's what I've been going with since 2012, and it's certainly sticking. So to tell you my backstory a little bit is I was born and raised in Holland, came to the United States when I was 18 in 1988, a few years ago, by myself with literally $500 in my pocket with a plan to go work in a local camp for 8 weeks and travel the country. Well, after my few days stay in New York City, I think I did not have a penny to my name. I came up to upstate New York and really had make my own way. Now, good thing is I had a bed to sleep in, and they gave me 3 meals. But I still had that big dream of traveling the United States. Long story short, I met a wonderful person. I got connected to her, but she went to college in September. And luckily enough, I was able to take her job in a local restaurant, and they gave me another bed, another 3 meals. And I kind of make my way into the new world of living in the United States, learning to speak the language. With literally one shirt and one tie, I was waiting on tables in a small restaurant. Interesting enough, right then and there, I had the opportunity a year later to take over a bakery delicatessen and pizzeria in that small town in Hancock, New York. And I took the chance. So that was my first entrepreneurial opportunity. It was presented to me. I grabbed the bull by the horn, took over a shop that was losing money, and turned it around into making something that actually worked for me and my small family at that point in time. But I always had that underlying, inkling, that itch that I wanted to be in medicine. And originally I wanted to be a doctor, but I kind of got sidetracked a little bit because of my own, behavioral issues as a teenager, being rambunctious. I wanted to travel, not paying attention in school. But although I always was a hard worker, and because of that, I joined the local volunteer fire department and ambulance corps. And I caught, a little bit of love from the local team. And they said, listen, this is what really want to do. And that's how I pursued my career in healthcare, and sold the pizzeria a few years later, which luckily the pizzeria is still in existence. So we must have done something right in the early beginnings. Sold it at a very small little profit, and went to school and became a paramedic. I've been a paramedic for over 30 years. Flew helicopters for many years in between as a medic. But along the way in my 30s, I said, hey, listen, I have 3 kids, and eventually I would have 5 kids. They said, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to send all these kids to college? And that's when I went back to school, and I got my bachelor's, master's, and my fellowship, and started working in the more corporate world, worked my way up the career ladder, with lots of bumps and bruises and twists and turns along the way. And we could dive into all of those. But at the end of the day, what I learned there is something what I'm doing today. The struggle of the people who go from doing to leading is real. And often they don't get the support necessary to be successful. And too many of them fail. So this is what I do today is I work with people, with small operators, with startup businesses, with new leaders or people who are emerging leaders, and help them build capacity as a leader, to help them build a vision, teach them how to solve problems at root causes, create opportunities, and put a rigor into place around operational rhythm in order to be successful on a more predictable level. So listen, let's dive into any of the subjects that you might be interested in.
Yeah, I love it because I feel like this perfect conversation to have you on here for, because I think we got a lot of young leaders or people in position where they're taking on new leadership roles and responsibilities. So I'd love to even just kind of kick it off there if you're down for that. When someone is kind of thrown into or taking or stepping up, I guess, into a position where now they have to, they've got these new set of responsibilities and a team to lead or different expectations and such. What's like the number one common mishap or mistake that people kind of take when they do step into like a leadership position?
Yeah, so interesting that we have to remember that most people who are successful in life were high performance at some point in time doing things. And that could be the startup entrepreneur who is laser focused on a new product or a new service, or somebody who came up with the ranks as a doctor or a nurse or other type of technician in banking or IT. And they were then promoted into a new role of a leader. And the biggest mistake they make in that role is to continue to do rather than to lead. And they end up pushing rather than getting to what we call pulling. Learning how to delegate is an art, and it's a learned behavior. Of course, there are innate natural leaders who are phenomenal, but that's far and few in between. Most of us need to get some kind of education and support and structure. Sadly, is when you do your bachelor's or master's degree, nobody teaches you how to become a highly effective leader. They teach you all the foundations of math and accounting and operations and strategy and all that stuff, but not how to effectively lead. So we see a lot of small companies, and that's part of the reason why the most small businesses in the United States actually fail, is not because they don't have willpower. It's not because they don't have skill. They just don't know how to manage processes and lead people. And that's where the biggest barrier is. And so my advice always is that if you start working as an entrepreneur, ask for help. Brene Brown is a well-known speaker worldwide. Her key thing is you do not need to go at it alone. And interesting, Rob, women are much better at asking for help than men.
Mhm.
And you say, why is that? Because of a small phenomenon called ego. Guys' egos often are too big and their pride stands in the way of progress. It's almost like they unintentionally rather fail than have to ask for help. So that's what I see as the greatest opportunity for learning as people are listening to this, is that be vulnerable. It is okay to ask for help. It is okay to be vulnerable, because if you want to be successful, you have to become a phenomenal people leader and process manager.
Yeah, I love that. That's very powerful stuff. And I was blessed because my graduate program that I had gone through, they put a pretty decent amount of emphasis on leadership and management. Although there's totally different things between leadership and management, but they did put a lot into it. And there's a lot of philosophy and principles that they kind of talked about. But afterwards, I was in a position, and I agree with you. I feel like so many small businesses failed to kind of move to get to that next level because whoever is in the leadership position is afraid or unable to really step aside and really step into that leadership role and start to delegate and move some things around or instill new processes that they need to, and nobody wants to give up the reins. So if someone's like in that position where they really like being in there and working on the floor and doing things, I feel like you got to kind of bring somebody else in to kind of bring into that leadership type thing. And it brings up my memory of this one place that I used to work at, a facility, and that was it to the T. We had so much business was booming, but the main guy just never got off the floor, and he could just never move into the next role and kind of step away. And I appreciate you sharing that. That was great stuff there. But I want to ask now is like, how do you or what? Let me I take a step back there. Let me ask you, what is your definition of success?
Well, that success is defined by the customer, right? Not my sense of success. But my success is getting up every morning inspired and motivated to go to work. So in other words, I'm happy to go to work and making an impact and a difference in the people that I coach and mentor. Success is defined by the individual. But one of the things when I work with people and I ask them the question, what is your big dream? Too many people say, I don't really know. Or their big dream is maybe one step up from where they are today. So those limited thoughts limit your ability to be successful. Right now, don't get me wrong. There are some people say, listen, they might be in a supervisory position and they are happy as a clam. That's all they want to do. Or they're great technicians. That's good too. So not everybody needs to become the CEO of a company. But it is important to dream. So if you as an entrepreneur have a big dream, then you need to learn to articulate that. But the key to a big dream is that that follows with small action steps you need to take to get closer to that bigger dream. And that's the next thing is that people procrastinate or they suffer from imposter syndrome or they don't have the confidence or they don't have the courage to take the steps to get one step closer to that. And again, they end up losing out or not being happy. And sadly, I think it's 72% of the workforce is not quite happy going to work on Monday morning. And imagine 40 years of work in your lifetime and not being really fulfilled is a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a friend who's in a position where he really dislikes his job and he's just doing it because he's got a family and he's just counting down the days to retire. And I'm like, dude, you're not even 30 yet. You got a while. That's going to be a brutal trip. But I asked you about the definition of success because I agree totally with you. It totally is individualized. And I also believe that it changes.
Mhm.
And I think it changes over time. As you were kind of sharing about your story, you definitely had different goals and different ideas of what success was for you as you've kind of grown and evolved as an individual. And I've gone through the similar thing. My background is in strength and conditioning, and I was a strength and conditioning coach for a long time. And as I continued to grow and evolve as an individual, so too did my coaching and my coaching practice. And that was a challenging step for me to kind of take because I didn't want to forget my identity of who I was, but it was slowing me down from really stepping into the identity of who I wanted to become. And I want to ask you, for individuals who are kind of in a similar situation where they are kind of stuck and maybe their definition of success or their goals or things that they're working on is kind of where they're at and they're limiting and preventing themselves from getting into that next level. How do you know when it's time to adjust or redefine success or set new goals?
Uh, I think that the best indicator is burnout, right? Or near burnout. You don't want to get to the point. At the foundation of all our being, there's mental wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, relationship wellness, and financial. Right? So the five pillars. Those are things we need to continuously work on. And when we see them being out of whack, we need to sometimes take more drastic steps. Of course, what is the number one barrier to change? Of course, it's money. Right? Most people are very afraid, and no different. When I was young and had kids and married, that having that regular paycheck every 2 weeks coming in helped put food on the table and have a sense of security. If you have an underlying entrepreneurial spirit, it's very difficult to say, listen, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to now go out on my own, and fighting for every single kernel of bread in order to be able to feed my family, and that's difficult to do. It's a very difficult decision for people to make. With that said, of course, is there comes a point in time that you have to weigh the options. You can continue on the path that you're in and really get into a depressive state, or you can start taking some chances. Now, my approach, what I recommend for folks to do, is they do things simultaneously. They can still work in that job that your friend who's at 30 is looking at, how many more days to retirement. But what else can they do on a daily basis to continue their own development to get one step closer to something they would like to do? And that is very powerful, and that is certainly very possible. It requires you to develop a journey map, right? These are not things that will come overnight or on its own. So I use an individual development plan for that. So you can actually literally write out what that looks like in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. Then you take in that 70-20-10 approach in your current role and say, okay, in my current role, what else can I learn in order to get one step closer to my big dream? The 20% represents who can be my coach or my mentor, who can hold me accountable to making progressive steps and provides deep experiences so I can maybe prevent some of the pitfalls or get some guidance how to accelerate that. And the 10% is about learning, right? Is that what is the gap between where I want to go to where I am today, and what education do I need to receive in order to be eligible for those types of roles? So by having a map and by taking small action steps with key milestones and measuring, and that's the key, is measuring your own performance on a daily, weekly basis, you're more likely to be successful and getting out of that rut where you're in, or creating opportunities of things that you really want to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. The idea of creating that map and kind of pushing it through is really powerful. But and then going back to what you said earlier, that it's okay to be vulnerable and ask for help and seeking a mentor or a coach or somebody along the lines, because that's just going to expedite your journey and get you there way faster than anything else. Which makes me curious to ask you, like, who's been a good mentor for you along your journey?
So I've had three phenomenal mentors, and I will say the first one, his name is Ed Horton. He gave me my first opportunity as a paramedic to become a paramedic supervisor. And I was not quite sure, what does that look like? I love being a medic. I was very good at it, but now I'm going to lead other people, right? And he helped me see the bigger picture and provide not only guidance, but also he led to example. He was a servant type leader at that point in time. Now we talk about the early 90s. Then I met a gentleman along the way, Mike Versina. He's now retired. He wrote several books, but one book I would highly recommend to any of your readers to pick up is called Leading with the Upper Brain. He's a neuroscience executive who really helped me understand how the brain functions and how we react versus respond, and how to counter that, and how to be accountable to self. And then my mentor of the last 12, 13 years, who has really helped and guided me even into my business and into being an entrepreneur, Mark Oborn, phenomenal gentleman, wise beyond, beyond words. And he really helped me understand the bigger picture. Now, interesting enough, none of these trees came to me, but I found them to be part of my life. And that's the key, right? If you sit back in your chair and wait for your company to bring somebody to you, the likelihood of that happening is not very good. So I found ways in the companies that I worked to raise money, to find the best in the industry, to bring them into the company and to help guide, including, be my coach and my mentor along the way. And I've developed deep friendships ever since. And even today, years after the last paid engagement, we're still checking on a regular basis, because that's the kind of partnership relationship that we have formed. So I highly recommend anybody in a role today that you say, listen, I'm kind of stuck, or I have a big dream and I don't know what to do. Find yourself the right mentor to work with in order to get you, out of your chair and on the road. And hopefully these people can help accelerate and expand your network as well.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff, because I used to be in a position where I was always asking everybody, like, okay, well, I know I got to get a mentor. I know I got to get a coach. And I've gone down that road where I've hired tons and tons of coaches, all great in their own regard. But never somebody who really connected or helped me in the way that I was really looking for. Spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy on a lot of things that weren't really aligned with me, until I found my mentor. And for me, at first, I didn't know he was going to be my mentor, but I signed up for one of his things and I just continued to sign up, sign up, sign up, started going to a lot of his workshops. And then all of a sudden he was like, "Hey dude, like I would love to have you, bring you in and start to go through some of the material as well," and brought me on to start teaching some of those things. And now have such a great relationship with him. And I couldn't be more grateful for it too. But I had to go out there and actively find that and continue to seek it. And it took a lot of time, but I'm grateful for it. And you can't, like you said, sit back and just expect somebody to just plop into your lap.
Yep.
And even if they do, I feel like it's probably too good to be true. And there's probably some sort of a scam associated with
Yeah.
it.
So on that note, I just want to make a distinction that what we look for sometimes is coaches, right? Because we are familiar with the word coach, like on a soccer team or a football team or this. The thing is, what you need is a mentor. A mentor is somebody who speaks from deep personal experience, somebody who's been there, done that, successfully, not successfully, but they can bring value to you, to whatever it is that you focus on. A coach is somebody who can keep you motivated, who can keep you accountable, who can give a good lecture, who can give a good motivational speech, and talk about strategy. But that's higher level, right? What most people need is really mentorship. So one of the things that I strongly advocate for is that any new leader coming into an organization, for the first 6 months, they get tied to a mentor. And with that, they can accelerate the onboarding process, and they're also more likely to stay with the company and be more productive in the long run. But people are still, a bit narrow-minded about that. Is well, that comes at a cost. I said, well, have you ever checked what the cost of turnover is? And the answer is no, because it's not on the P&L. The cost of turnover in an organization can cost somewhere from 75 to $150,000. Well, a coaching or a mentorship or a relationship for 6 months might only cost you 5 or 10,000. Well, I take that return on investment every day of the week. So again, the key thing is the thing. The second thing I want to say is this, and a lot of people make mistakes. You can go online and learn. You can go to a webinar. You can go to a conference. The problem is by Monday morning, most of it is forgotten unless you take actionable steps. So when I say I mentor, everybody I work with on a weekly basis for 30 minutes, they have action steps that they learn to hold themselves accountable to. These are small little building blocks. That's the difference. So you and I can talk for once a month and I can add value in that monthly conversation to you. You feel good about it. The likelihood that you will follow through and do something with it is not so great. So you keep going back in the same month after month after month, talk about the same things or different issues, but you don't really accomplish anything. So the key to mentorship is to have measurable objectives that you can teach the person to be self-accountable to, and that will allow you to accelerate in anything that you try to accomplish.
Yeah, I feel like that is really important to kind of distinguish there. I know back in when I was in strength and conditioning, there I had plenty of clients who would come in and they would essentially rely on me just to keep them in check. I would teach form like until my like brain was numb and coaching cues, spending hours and hours and hours. But the second that I don't cue somebody, they just kind of fall apart. And I would have to revisit them and be like, hey, you need to start to internalize some of this information and you need to go through this yourself because I'm not going to always be here. You need to put yourself in a situation where you can hold yourself into the correct positions throughout and through because you also don't want me forever. You want to be able to move on and grow and continue to train and do your things yourself. And I feel like that's an important thing there is when you were talking about the mentorship too, you want to, otherwise you're going to fall back into it and then you're going to be in that cycle of continuously never moving and growing forward.
So there's actually a very
But
in-
I,
so there's actually a very interesting equation you can use for that. So
oh,
performance or high performance is the function of two things: a technical skill and behavioral capacity. So you teaching them a technical skills, in other words, over, when you do it 2, 4, 5, 10 times, you know how to do it. But if they don't do it, it's not the technical skills. We keep going back to reteaching them their technical skills. It's really their behavior. And one thing is that we are not very good at is teaching and transforming people's behavior. And that is an area of, a weakness that most people have because their own behavioral capacity isn't very high. So when I work with clients, the first place I start off with is that identify something that you have, you resist doing that is very difficult, but you should be doing, and start holding yourself accountable, right? So we want to create people who are fully committed and self-directed, right? And that requires you to first learn to be self-accountable. So funny, I'm talking to you. I don't like going to the gym, but I know that. So on my calendar, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it tells me I need to go to the gym. I need to work out. And I score myself every Tuesday morning on did I do it? Yes, no, red, yellow, and green. And if I have more yellows and reds, I need to ask myself, why is that? And then I need to withhold something for myself, not as punishment, but as a countermeasure or a consequence, because I didn't do what I set out to do, right? And that is
Hmm.
critically important to success. And that is where, again, most people are falling short because they say, oh, report cards, like we were in elementary school. I don't need that. I will just do it in my head. Well, I promise you, I've worked with enough clients. Those who measure their performance on a daily and weekly basis outperform those who don't every day of the week.
Yo, what's up? Sorry for interrupting. It's me, Rob. If you've been listening and thinking, man, I just know I'm capable of so much more, but something's just really not clicking, well, I've got something for you. It's called the Prime Performance Personality Quiz. And in just a few minutes, you'll uncover what's actually slowing you down. So, whether it's a mindset block, energy drain, or a lack of clarity, this quiz is going to give you specific insights to help you build momentum again. Again, this quiz is free, fast, and honestly, freakishly accurate. So take it now over at survivingthesidehustle.com/quiz and stop spinning, start winning today. Yeah, so Walter, I wanted to ask you, coming to the States, I imagine you didn't have too many people around. You like your young age, you're starting off in the city, moving up to upstate New York, which I'm very familiar with. Population is a little bit different compared to the city. So I got to ask you, how did you get connected? Where did you get started networking, and how did you do that when you are essentially all by yourself?
So I'll add one complex layer to it is by nature, I'm an introvert. Which makes it even more difficult along the journey, right? I'm very comfortable having a one-to-one conversation. I get really no energy in sitting in crowds or going to meetings or working in a room. But I did have an enlightening moment that in order to be successful, you have to network. And that started off in the early days when what I said, I had just one a fancy shirt and a tie, and I worked in a restaurant. You can go there and do your job and never talk to anybody, but on the end of the day, you don't take any tips or very little. So I tried to make a connection with every single person that was in the restaurant, and because of that, I earned far more than most others who worked in the same restaurant. And I carried that forward. And interesting enough, when I took over the bakery pizzeria, there too, it is always about interaction. So customers could come in, get their cup of coffee, sit down, and we don't say a word. They might come back, might not come back. But if you engage them in conversation, then they're more likely to come back because they find a sense of familiarity and comfort. So somebody told me a long time the magic to that is to learn to relate to each other rather than compare to each other. Right? It is if I learn to relate, so if I put six people in the room, and I've done this as a leader with a very diverse group, everybody gets to represent five values. And I bet you that by the time you get around the table, that each one of you can at least relate to one or two of the things like family or religion or sports or an activity that you get to know each other and you can learn how to relate. So that was key, and I always did that. So as a leader, you have to go on the Gemba. In other words, go to where the work is done and show real interest in the people that you lead. When you belong to professional organizations, you can't just sit back in the back row. You have to participate. So I made it a point whenever I went somewhere, I wanted to meet two new people and ask one question. As difficult it was for me to stand up and say, I want to ask a question, I always made a comment, always asked a question. And through that, you start developing a sense of comfort and sense of confidence. And that's when you can start becoming more outward. And it feels more natural, even if you're still that introvert, right? And that's what I do today. So when I go out networking, for example, it is our natural tendency to start to form a circle around the table and talk. And try to present the way. Listen, let's make this a horseshoe, right? Open the circle up, because there's always new people like you and I coming into the room who feel very uncomfortable, and it's much easier to join a horseshoe than get in a closed circle itself.
Mm.
And the groups that I belong to, like American Council of Healthcare Executives, New York, New Jersey, and other groups, we do that now, and it seems to be very successful. And people find it easier to make networking connections. But yes, always remember that if you want to be successful in business or you want to be successful in your career journey, networking must be, it's not an option, must be a part of what you do every single day.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That is very important, and that horseshoe information there is pretty cool. I'm going to try that out next time I'm out and about, because people do tend to form into like circles and close off everybody, whether it's like restaurants, bars, or networking events or
Yeah.
conferences. People tend to do that, so I'm going to keep an eye out for that and try my best to kind of stick to that as well. But I feel like the other side of networking, you've got the connecting and relating and making sure that you really develop those relationships. But how do you develop those relationships? How do you build the trust and the engagement and kind of create your reputation, and whether it's networking or in a business standpoint with your audience and the public itself?
Yeah. So I'll give you another equation. It's similar to the first one, that it's still high performance equals the function of trust multiplied by engagement. So the first thing is trust. Trust is non-negotiable. If there's no trust, nothing else really happens. So what can I do to build trust? Well, what I can do is to show genuine interest in the people that I want to have a relationship with, or who I need to have a partnership with. So getting to know the people is critically important, not from an inward perspective, but from an outward perspective, right? Show empathy, show understanding, use phenomenal listening skills, asking the right questions, keep coming back over and over, not just making it a one-time affair. So that allows you to build a network and a relationship, and that you sometimes need to empower that to become a true partnership. As an entrepreneur, you need to build relationships, because the more people you know, more likely it is that people will tell about your service and utilize your service. That's how you drive revenue. Well, sometimes you need partners in the business too. So it takes time to develop an integrated or maybe even a synergistic partnership. That relies on getting to know the people. So, and getting to know the people is not, and it's the book that I always recommend everybody to read, is The Five Love Languages by Gary Kaplan. So that is good at home in your relationship as well as in business. You need to understand the language, but the intrinsic value of the person you're trying to build a relationship or partnership with. And once you know and understand that, you need to cater to that, and hopefully vice versa as well. But that takes time and effort on your part. So in business, right, as an executive, I would send out a survey to all of my team members, 14 words on it. I say, circle the 4 words that mean the most to me, to you, and they give it back to me. Now, one person say, "Hear me, inform me, uh, you know, uh, uh, you know, appreciate me." Another one says, "Grow me, push me, use me." So each one of them gives you feedback that you now can utilize in your day-to-day operation in order to be able to give them what they want. And often we think I give them what I want. Well, good luck with that. That's an inward leadership behavior rather than outward leadership behavior. If the people trust you and you engage them the way they want to be engaged, that is powerful. Now, if you can now align that to the North Star or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, and then people get to buy into it rather than being controlled, listen, you can be on fire, right? You can become unstoppable.
Yeah, I love that, and I do. I'm in and out of the communication world and like conflict resolution, navigating power dynamics, the kind of world like that, pretty frequently with different workshops and groups of individuals. And I was told once that that great leaders or good leaders know how to communicate effectively to a lot of people. But great leaders know how to communicate based off of how the other person likes to communicate. So that's
Mhm.
like different communication styles and understanding their drives and motives and things like that. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with that, and really understanding those like those motivations and the love languages and all that. And gaining that more insight on your audience, whether it's public or if it's your team or even yourself. Sometimes I feel like it's good to kind of revisit and check in with yourself because, like, kind of like the definition of success and different goals, things change over time. I know for myself,
Without
I used to
that.
be in achievement drive and then I shift to a adversity drive. And sometimes I'm in a unity kind of drive, and things change, different seasons of life. And I think that's
Yeah.
powerful to point out to everybody.
Yeah.
Um, but so I got to ask, goes, you're working with a lot of different people. Who are you working with specifically nowadays? Are you doing, is it more corporate kind of things? Is it bigger businesses, or is it small personal brand entrepreneurs? Who, if you even are still opening to working with people?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have a great mix. I have half of what I do is working with individuals across the spectrum, from IT to banking to startup to healthcare, and then the other half of the time I spend with corporations or larger healthcare systems or companies where they send me individuals, and I work with small teams. So when it is individual, it's often to help them accelerate and through the culture, or they have been selected as somebody who's going to be a future leader at the company, and it's often done for recruitment and retainment purposes, or to accelerate, the performance on the point of how they function as a new leader with a new team. As a team, and I really enjoy doing that. I meet with people on a weekly basis around a very specific target that they need to hit, and I teach, in both the leadership as well as A3 thinking on how to solve problems at root causes, how to set a team up for success, how to have the right people in the right roles, how to develop that unified vision, have meaningful metrics, that cadence of accountability, and how to take action for the duration. Yes, I'm always open to engaging with anybody. I love working with people. I do 99% of my work in a virtual environment, so it doesn't make a difference where I am or where you are. The only thing I ask people to do is to reduce the noise around them, so we can have true, meaningful sessions. Again, once a week for 30 minutes. That's my goal. And of course, I always make myself available. I say to people, I say, all you do is text me, say, Walter, you have a minute? I'll make time for you. As a leader, you have to be flexible. As a mentor, I have to be flexible as well and try to meet people in the time of their needs.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. So how do people get in touch with you if they're interested in hearing more about you or staying up to date?
Yeah, great. I mean, you can go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm pretty easy to find. There's only one Walter Dusseldorp in the United States. Follow me there, or go to my website. You can book a free consultation call, and we can talk about your journey and see if there's any opportunities for collaboration. There's lots of information there. I write an article per week. You can go to my YouTube channel at the Dutch Mentor. I post every day 1 minute nuggets around leadership, so it keeps your brain engaged, always a small little action item attached to it. So I welcome conversations, and I'd be happy to come out and to do lectures or to do talks. Always remember that every talk is action based.
Yeah. Well, Walter, I really appreciate this conversation. I know I took down a bunch of information, and like this is going to be a masterclass. I know I'm going to be listening back to this episode multiple times, and I can imagine a lot of my listeners are going to be diving in and listening multiple times. So this was powerful. I really appreciate it, and taking the time too. I know it's super busy. The week's coming towards an end, and it's tough to kind of fit things into the schedules. And I appreciate you taking that time. But before I let you go, I got to ask you, if you were to boil it all down and take all the information and lessons you've learned from the mentors and different experiences that you've lived through, if you were to boil it to one piece of advice that would help somebody kind of level up or get to that next level or create a little bit of momentum to get the ball rolling, what would be your piece of advice for them?
The key takeaway that less is more. Be very focused on what it is that you want to do. Don't dilute yourself. Know your value. And with that, you need to take action. Right? Measure everything that you do and hold yourself accountable. If you do that well, day in and day out, you're unstoppable.
Boom. I love it. That's awesome. Again, Walter, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to staying connected and chatting with you again soon, man.
For sure, Rob. Thank you very much for having me on, and I look forward to our next conversation.
And that That's it for this episode of Surviving the Side Hustle. If you found this valuable, the best way to support the show is to rate and review on Apple or Spotify. It helps get the show in front of more driven individuals just like you, and helps them discover the tools to get unstuck, break through burnout, and build something real. And you can always connect deeper with me, our guests, or grab free resources at survivingthesidehustle.com/Rob. Whether it's a strategy call, the Prime Performance Personality Quiz, some of our products, or just to check out our free content library, connect with us over at survivingthesidehustle.com/Rob. And hey, remember this, you weren't meant to just grind. You were built to grow. So stay conscious, stay committed, and keep showing up. Peace, guys.